This happened a few months ago. I moved back to my small town and always walked around at night. I was hoping to snap some photos, but mostly, I just wanted to clear my head. One evening in late autumn, I noticed a flickering light coming from the old church at the end of the street. I had walked by it countless times but never went inside. It seemed like the perfect opportunity for some interesting shots that I pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. The air was stale and cool. Dust clung to everything, and the cold stone walls loomed around me. I felt a chill in the air. My heart raced as I stepped further inside. The pews were lined up, dusty but oddly beautiful in the dim light. The stained glass windows glowed eerily. I grabbed my camera and took a few shots. Everything was still until I heard a faint tapping sound. It echoed throughout the church. I paused, heart pounding, but then I shrugged it off. Maybe it was just the wind. I kept snapping pictures, drawn to the way the light danced through the glass. I tried not to think about how alone I was. Over the next few nights, I returned to the church. Each time, the flickering light was waiting for me. I captured the beauty of the dust and shadows. But with each visit, unease crept in. The laughter I heard seemed to float in the air, playful yet unsettling. Shadows flickered at the corners of my vision, darting just beyond the light. I would turn quickly, but there was nothing there. One night, I set my camera down and stepped deeper into the church. The tapping was louder now, a steady rhythm like a heartbeat. I didn't know what to do. My stomach twisted. I ventured toward the back, where the light glowed brighter. I squinted into the darkness, seeking the source. Just then, the shadows shifted. It felt wrong that I turned to leave, but a burst of cold air wrapped around me, and I heard laughter again, this time louder, closer. I froze. The sound made my skin crawl. I wanted to bolt, but my feet wouldn't move. I swallowed hard and finally stepped back toward the door. Then the door slammed shut. I jumped, and the laughter stopped abruptly. My breath hitched. My heart raced, and I fumbled with the handle. It wouldn't budge. That same tapping began again, insistent and rhythmic. Whatever was in the shadows felt near. Fear raced through me like fire. Desperate, I pulled out my camera, snapping pictures toward the windows, hoping to catch something. I couldn't retreat. I needed to see what was happening. The flashes illuminated fleeting forms just outside my light. They weren't human, moving with a life of their own. Then I heard the whispers again, closer this time. I turned around, and I swear something was there watching me. I squinted into the darkness, trying to make sense of what I saw. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure it would alert whatever lurked there. The air felt electric, charged with something unseen. I raised my camera, fingers shaking, and snapped another shot. The flash cut through the darkness, and for a second, I saw it, a figure, just at the edge of the light. It wasn't human, that much was clear. The shape flickered like a candle's flame, shifting and warping before vanishing into the shadows. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in sharp gasps. I wanted to scream, but it wouldn't come out. Then, out of the silence, the tapping began again. It sped up, a frantic tempo that matched my racing heart. My eyes darted around the church, searching for the source. Just ahead, the flickering light flickered more violently, almost alive. The laughter returned. It was higher now, like the giggle of a child, yet it knotted my stomach that I forced myself to turn back toward the door. If I could just reach it, I could escape. But the door still refused to budge. The handle felt cold and unyielding in my grasp. Panic clawed at my throat. I was trapped. In a moment of desperation, I aimed my camera at the windows, capturing the vivid colors once more. Maybe if I had proof, I could understand what was happening. I snapped picture after picture, each flash revealing more chaos just beyond my reach. That's when I noticed something different. The images on the screen, the first few captured only shadows, but now, real faces emerged in those fleeting moments. Eyes stared back at me wide, dark, filled with mischief. My breath hitched again as I recognized one of the faces. It was a boy I used to play with in this very church, a friend from my childhood. But something felt terribly wrong. He had a smile that twisted in ways I remembered, yet distorted too. "Help us," came a voice, clear and sharp, in a tone that echoed from the recesses of my mind. It was the boy's voice. I stumbled back, my camera slipping from my hands, crashing to the floor. I felt bile rise in my throat. Had I really heard him, or was it all in my head? The laughter evolved into something darker now, wrapping around me, pulling me closer to the shadows. Fear was suffocating. A shift in the air blasted through the church, extinguishing the flickering light and plunging everything into darkness. Suddenly, I was no longer alone. The sound of shuffling feet could be heard all around me, faint and far too close. Then, everything went silent. I held my breath, my body frozen, sensing that whatever was in here with me had made its choice. I fumbled for my camera in the dark, every instinct screaming at me to find a way out. But then, I caught a glimpse. A pale hand reached toward me from the darkness. I stumbled backward, my lungs burning, searching frantically for the light. Just as I felt the cold fingers brush against my skin, the laughter erupted anew, filling the empty space with a haunting chorus. I blinked, my heart pounding in my chest, and when I opened my eyes, I was no longer inside the church. I stood outside in the autumn night, the church looming behind me, still and silent. But the door was ajar, inviting me back in. That's when I remembered the faces I had seen in my camera, the laughter that turned to whispers. I had to know the truth. I stepped forward, engine revving, my curiosity battling the terror that churned within me. What would I discover if I dared to go back? I hesitated at the threshold, my hand hovering above the door handle. The air was still, yet heavy, as if the church itself knew my fear and was waiting for me to make a choice. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open wider, stepping into the darkness once more. Inside, the silence crept around me like a shroud. My heart raced, absolutely certain it wouldn't find peace here. I pulled my phone from my pocket, using its weak light to scan the room. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance, just the familiar creaking pews and the altar draped in shadows. As I moved deeper, the faint sound of whispering echoed in the distance. It was a jumble of voices layered over one another, rising and falling in an eerie rhythm. I felt a chill run down my spine. I inched forward, drawn to the sound, each step a battle against the voice in my head warning me to turn back. Then, just as I reached the altar, a flash of color caught my eye. I quickly turned my camera back on and aimed it at the stained glass windows, still vibrant despite the encroaching darkness. I snapped a few shots, hoping to capture more of those twisted faces. Each flash illuminated the room for brief moments, casting fleeting shadows that seemed to dance away before I could focus on them. I reviewed the images on my camera's screen. Instead of clarity, I found only chaos. The faces appeared warped, like a funhouse mirror reflecting my worst fears. Among the colors, I noticed a new figure, a girl, her face framed with long dark hair, twisting a finger and beckoning me closer. "Over here," her whisper floated through the air, soft yet urgent. Something inside me compelled me to follow. I moved cautiously, almost in a trance. The whispers grew louder, resonating off the cool stone walls, swirling around me like leaves in a tempest. I began to reach for the girl, but just as I did, the laugh returned, high-pitched and disruptively joyful, cutting through the air like glass. In a sudden rush, the lights overhead flickered back on, bathing the room in stark, unforgiving brightness. I shielded my eyes, disoriented, and when I opened them again, the girl was gone. Only the sound of silence filled the church, heavier than before, but something else drew my attention. At the corner of my eye, I caught movement, shadows shifting in the far right of the altar. I turned to face it, a wave of dread washing over me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a message, but instead found my camera app open. One photo appeared at the forefront, its image striking and clear against the plain background of my other, chaotic shots. The girl's face stared back at me, but this time her expression had transformed. She looked trapped, eyes wide with fear, mouth moving silently desperate. I could see her lips repeat those two words, shivering in the air, "Help us." Before I could catch my breath, the lights flickered again, then went out. Darkness crashed over me like a wave. I whipped around, panic clawing at me, but there was no one there. I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching, waiting. Then a new sound crept into the silence, a tapping, steady and deliberate, like fingers drumming against wood. It was close, too close. My heart felt like it would burst. I turned toward the sound, and that was when I saw it, a figure in the darkness, moving toward me with purpose. That I backed away, adrenaline surging. I had to find a way out before the shadows claimed me too. But the only exit lay beyond that figure, and it was closing in fast. I stumbled backward, my pulse racing. The figure loomed closer, its outline barely discernible in the gloom. I thought about rushing past it, but the fear of what might happen made me freeze in place. Where was the door? Was it really behind that thing? Panic threatened to engulf me. Before I could think it through, I turned again, desperately waving my phone's light around the room. The shadows seemed to swallow its glow, making the darkness deepen. I needed to find a new way out. Then, a crash echoed from the back of the church, books tumbling from a shelf. My head whipped in that direction, instincts kicking in. I took a cautious step toward the noise, grasping tightly onto my phone. This was my only source of light and reassurance. With guttural whispers still playing tricks in my mind, I snuck toward the sound. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but I was willing to take a chance. As I turned the corner near the old wooden lectern, I found a dusty old door that I'd never noticed before, partially obscured by a tattered curtain. Was it a way out? My heart rate quickened as I edged closer. The whispers transformed into muffled cries, urgent and pleading. I hesitated, the rational part of my mind screaming to avoid whatever lay hidden behind that door. But those cries felt real. "Help us." The word echoed in my mind, mirroring what the girl had said. With shaking hands, I pulled at the door. It creaked loudly, sounding more like a warning than an invitation. I peered inside, my phone illuminating a narrow staircase winding down into blackness. The cries intensified, spurring my decision. I had to know that. I stepped inside, forcing myself to move forward. The air grew thicker, and with each downward step, my unease deepened. The further I went, the more the cries split into unrecognizable voices, each fighting to be heard over the other. I pressed on, despite my instincts urging me to turn back. Halfway down, I stumbled on a loose stone and nearly fell, bracing myself against the wall. My phone flickered, light dimming as the battery icon flashed red. I couldn't let it die now. I needed all the light I could get. Then I noticed something on the ground. A small, old photograph lay half hidden in the dust. I bent down, my pulse quickening as I turned it over, my heart pounding in my chest. The photo captured two girls standing outside the church, a place that looked eerily familiar. They wore matching dresses, and their smiles felt off, just out of reach of normalcy. As I studied their faces, I felt a moment's connection, as if their eyes were pleading with me for something I couldn't quite understand. The air grew colder, an icy finger tracing down my spine. Just then, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I spun around, terror clawing at my throat. The figure from the church was at the top of the stairs, silhouetted by the faint light breaking through. It took a step forward, and all I could think was that I might be too late. I bolted down the last few steps, my heart pounding. The dim glow from my phone flickered ominously, and I felt the heavy weight of darkness pressing down on me. I couldn't stay here. I had to keep moving. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, the cries morphed into a cacophony of despair. They resonated off the damp walls, each sound echoing the confusion bouncing around in my mind. I turned to the left, heading toward a narrow passage that led deeper into the unknown. The air felt charged as if something was stirring just beyond my sight. I strained to hear over the woman's haunting wails. "Help us!" The voices seemed to twist together, becoming one anguished plea. "Where are you?" I whispered, my voice swallowed by the darkness around me. I needed to understand. Dim light flickered at the end of the narrow passage. It was subtle but persistent. Gradually, the cries began to fade, replaced by a hushed whisper of rustling. As I approached the light, a new scent hit me, a strange mixture of decay and something sweetly nostalgic. My stomach churned. Rounding the corner, I found a small room. Faded portraits of solemn figures lined the walls, their painted eyes seemingly following me. In the center was a makeshift table covered in dust. Curiously, I stepped forward and saw an array of trinkets carefully arranged: a child's dress, a cracked doll, and a small, yellow journal. That I picked it up, surprised at how it felt warm against my palm. The name inscribed on the cover sent chills down my spine: Lila. The same name from my thoughts, the name that had echoed through the church. I flipped through the pages frantically. The familiar script filled with childlike drawings of the church, the girls, and strange symbols I'd never seen before. One page caught my eye. It read, "We take them in. We trap them close." My breath hitched at the realization. They weren't just looking for help, they'd been trapped here. Before I could process what I was reading, I noticed movement at the edge of my phone's beam. Something was in the shadows, shifting and growing larger. I turned back quickly, my heart racing again. I caught a glimpse of the figure from the church edging closer. Panicking, I slammed the journal shut and backed away, nearly tripping over my own feet. It wasn't just a figure anymore, a whole presence filled the room, heavy and oppressive. With the last flickers of my light, I saw its face, a distortion of fear and malice, eyes hollow yet wide, fixing on me with an intensity that turned my blood cold. Just then, the phone's battery drained completely, plunging me into darkness. I stood frozen, breath caught in my throat. The chilling whisper returned, now closer than ever. That's when I realized I was not alone. I took a shaky breath, the darkness pressing in around me like a heavy fog. Panic surged, and my pulse hammered in my ears. I had to move. I turned, my feet scrambling to find the narrow passage I'd just entered, but in that suffocating blackness, I couldn't tell where I was going. The whispers grew louder, twisting into a chorus of eerie laughter that sent shivers crawling down my spine. "You shouldn't have come here," they seemed to chant. "You shouldn't have come." The words echoed as if they were all around me, making it feel like the very walls were closing in. Every instinct told me to run, to escape. I stumbled forward, reaching out in front of me, desperate to feel something solid. I found the edge of the table from before. My fingers grazed over the dusty trinket scattered across its surface. Something shifted to my right, sending a thrill of ice through my veins. I wasn't imagining it. Desperately, I searched for a way out. After what felt like an eternity, I spotted a sliver of light beneath the door at the far end of the room. Without hesitation, I dashed toward it, my legs moving before my brain could catch up. The whispers followed, weaving through the air, urging me onward and warning me at the same time. As I pushed against the door, it swung open with a groan, creaking on its rusty hinges. Light flooded in, momentarily blinding me. I stumbled into the next room, panting. The smell of decay intensified in this space, a noxious mix that made me gag. I flung the door shut behind me, wishing for a solid barrier between me and whatever prowled in the shadows. It was a futile hope. Just ahead was a narrow corridor lined with doors, each one closed tight. My heart raced as I scanned them all. I didn't know which way to go or what might be waiting behind each one. Lila. The name pierced through the air, a soft, melodic voice that sent another chill running through me. I was convinced I was alone, but that voice was so real. "Help me. Help us." I reluctantly stepped forward, my breath hitching at the thought of opening any of the doors. The urge to flee battled against a deep curiosity that clawed at my thoughts. Why were their voices so familiar? Was Lila truly trapped here? But then, I heard it again. Dry, rattling breaths behind me, like a whisper carried on the wind. It felt as if the shadows were inching closer, the very space behind me humming with dread. "Leave now," the voice commanded, laced with urgency. Before I could react, the corridor grew darker, and suddenly, the lights flickered overhead. They sputtered, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls, when I saw it a shadowed figure, shifting behind me, growing larger and more defined with every flicker. My heart raced faster than ever. Whatever was following me was not going to let me leave. The figure stepped closer, its shape blurring the line between shadow and flesh. I stood frozen, torn between the dread curling in my stomach and a desperate urge to run. Sweat trickled down my spine, and my mind screamed. I had to act fast. I turned on my heel, racing down the corridor, willing my feet to move faster. The whispering voices surged again, drowning out the pounding of my heart. They seemed to weave into the very fabric of the air, echoing my fear back to me. "Help us," they taunted, a sinister melody that made my skin crawl. I slammed into the first door on my right, throwing it open without thinking. The room beyond was dark, but I stepped inside, hoping it would provide some shelter from the nightmare pursuing me. The door slammed shut behind me, and I leaned against it, struggling to catch my breath. The room was filled with old chairs and a musty smell that stung my nostrils. A narrow window let in a streak of moonlight, illuminating what looked like choir robes draped carelessly over the back of the chairs. Each robe seemed to whisper its own secret, and I shuddered at the thought of what had taken place here. "Lila?" I called, uncertain if I should even speak her name. I felt foolish, but the longing to find her pulled me deeper into the room. I waded through the muck of doubt and dread, but my resolve hardened. If she was trapped, I couldn't just abandon her to this dark fate. Just as I turned to search the space, an icy draft swept past me, and the room plunged into darkness. The moonlight flickered out as if snuffed by a giant hand. I felt the weight of something creeping in, taking its place. Panic knotted my gut. The whispers sharpened, growing clearer, more foreboding. "Leave this place now." I fumbled for the door, heart racing. My fingers brushed against something cold and solid, a silver candlestick. Instinctively, I grabbed it, feeling the weight of it steadied me, even just a little. Then came the unmistakable sound of shuffling feet outside my door. The shadows at the edges of the room seemed to swirl, closing in on me. With a breath of determination, I turned to face the door, ready to swing it open and confront whatever waited on the other side, but then I heard Lila's voice again, soft yet urgent. Stop. You have to find me. Where are you?" I shouted, panic clawing at my throat. My voice echoed in the thick silence, but there was no answer. Just the creeping dread that lurked outside. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to listen for any sign of movement. Suddenly, a loud thud resounded from just before it, shaking the very frame. My heart skipped a beat. Whatever was out there had decided it was time to come in. "Lila!" I yelled again, and in that moment, my courage teetered on the edge. I didn't know what waited for me behind either the door or the darkness around me, but I couldn't just stand there. I had to choose. Then, as if in answer, the door creaked open slightly, releasing a sliver of light that cut through the dark. Something was coming. And whatever it was no longer a question of only Lila's fate. Mine was intertwined with hers, a tangled web I couldn't escape. The door creaked open just enough for a sliver of light to slice through the darkness. I held my breath, staring into the tiny gap. Something stirred in the shadows outside. My grip tightened around the candlestick, a makeshift weapon that felt inadequate against the terror lurking beyond. I hesitated, weighing my options. I could leap into the unknown or stay hidden and hope the presence would pass. But then I thought of Lila. If I was going to save her, I had to take a risk. With trembling hands, I pushed the door wide open. The cool light flooded the room, illuminating the corridor beyond. It was empty, save for the ominous shadows creeping along the walls. My heart raced. Where was the sound of footsteps? I stepped into the hallway, candlestick raised, scanning for any sign of movement. The whispers had quieted, replaced by a thick silence that felt even more unnerving. "Lila?" I called, hoping against hope for any response. "Find me," her voice returned, distant yet clear. It seemed to float away, pulling me forward like a thread tugging at my chest. I followed the sound, moving cautiously down the corridor, every creak of the floorboards echoing in the silence. Halfway down the hall, I saw a flicker of movement at the edge of my vision. I turned sharply, but nothing was there. Just shadows stretching and bending against the walls. Sweat beaded on my forehead. Maybe I was losing my mind. Or maybe something was playing with me, waiting for my guard to drop. In that moment, I spotted a door slightly ajar at the end of the hall. The light from the moon spilled from the gap, casting long, eerie shadows on the floor. I rushed toward it, partly driven by fear of what might be lurking behind me. As I reached for the handle, a strange chill permeated the air, wrapping around my shoulders like icy fingers. I hesitated, heart thumping. What awaited me on the other side? But Lila's voice came again, stronger this time. "Please." I swung the door open, and the moonlight flooded into the small room. It looked like a study, filled with dust-covered books and old furniture. A large wooden desk stood resolutely in the middle, and an armchair sat next to it, almost as if waiting for someone. When I saw it. A small object glinting on the desk caught my eye. I stepped closer, my breath hitching as I realized it was an old locket. I picked it up, feeling the cool metal against my fingers. The surface was tarnished, but I could make out intricate design symbols I didn't recognize. That was when I heard it, a soft breath behind me. A presence that solidified into something real. "You shouldn't have come here." I turned slowly, and there, framed in the doorway, was a figure. Its features mottled and indistinct, a ghastly shape that made my stomach drop. Everything froze around me, a beat of silence that felt endless. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. The shadows had come alive. My heart raced as the figure loomed in the doorway, its presence filling the space with an oppressive energy. I was too terrified to look away. It shifted slightly, and I felt an icy breath against my neck, wrapping around me like a vice. "Who are you?" I managed to croak out, my voice barely above a whisper. It didn't answer. Instead, it slowly stepped forward, just enough for the light to catch the outline of its face. But the details were obscured, like a painting half removed from the canvas. I could barely breathe, my mind screaming at me to run, to hide. But Lila's voice echoed in my head. "Find me." The figure raised an arm, finger pointing towards the back of the study. I instinctively took a step back, but my feet felt glued to the floor. The shadows seemed to twist and writhe at its feet, alive with a malevolent energy that made me nauseous. "Leave her alone," I shouted, suddenly fueled by anger. My voice bounced off the walls, and for a moment, the figure hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed its face, if it even had one. Then, the air shifted, and a low growl emanated from the darkness behind it. I could feel my pulse in my throat as the figure jabbed its finger again. "You shouldn't be here. You have no idea what you're meddling with. What do you want? Where is Lila?" I pressed, desperation rising in me. "There is no saving her," it hissed, and with that, it lunged at me. Reacting on instinct, I swung the candlestick, the metal colliding with something solid but unyielding. The figure stumbled back, and in that split second of chaos, I ducked around it and bolted for the door. My breath came in sharp gasps as I ran back into the corridor, glancing over my shoulder. It was gone, but the shadows behind me deepened, swirling with a life of their own, that I reached the end of the hall, heart pounding violently. The whispers returned, quieter now but lingering like a song half remembered. "This way," Lila's voice called again, insistent and full of longing. I turned, following the sound, when suddenly the floorboards beneath me creaked ominously. I stumbled, catching myself against the wall, and that when the room flickered before my eyes. It felt like a heartbeat, a pulse of the house, as if I was losing my grip on reality with each passing second. At the far end of the hall, another door trembled in its frame. It was different from the others. A dim light seeped from the cracks, bathing the surroundings in a sickly glow. My instinct told me not to approach, but Lila's voice beckoned me stronger, more urgent than before. "Come." With no other choice, I pushed the door open, and the air rushed out of my lungs. A cold gust swept through, and for a moment, I thought I saw a fleeting figure dart past, a silhouette mirroring Lila's form. "Wait!" I shouted, stepping inside. But the moment I crossed the threshold, everything went dark. I fell into a void, senses swirling in a disorienting blackness that felt heavy around me. I could barely move, dizzy and lost, as whispers danced around me, no longer separate voices but one haunting chorus filling every corner of my mind. "Help us," they breathed, a cacophony of wrapped memories and sorrows. Then, like the flicker of a dying candle, a light broke through the darkness, a sheer beam illuminating a huge room, a sanctuary of sorrow. I blinked rapidly, trying to grasp the outlines of figures and the expressions on their faces. They weren't just shadows anymore, they wore the forms of lost children, their eyes wide and pleading. In their center, I saw her, Lila, aglow with ethereal light. "Lila!" I cried, hope igniting my heart. I surged forward, but with each step, I felt a grip tightening against my ankle, cold and unyielding. As I stumbled, the children's faces twisted, the laughter had returned higher now, echoing through the room, mingling with eerie whispers that urged me to turn back, to run. "No!" I shouted, forcing myself to move despite the choking grasp of dread. "I'm here to help you." The force at my ankles stilled as if my declaration had cut them loose. Lila looked toward me, her eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper, fear. "You shouldn't have come," her voice reverberated, a warning tangled in her plea. "You need to leave, now." The children began to swirl around me, shadows dancing in a whirl of sorrow, pulling me deeper into their melancholic grasp. I could see the outlines of their hands reaching out, waiting for something. I felt them trying desperately to convey feelings, memories, but the chaos was overwhelming. "Stop!" I yelled, desperation flooding every ounce of my being. In that moment, I realized I wasn't here just for Lila. I was caught in their unfinished stories. This place had ensnared them, and now me too. I had to escape this cycle. "Find the light!" Lila shouted, suddenly firm, pointing toward a glimmer in the far corner of the room, nearly obscured by a curtain of darkness. I turned to follow her gesture, heart racing, but the laughter grew louder, morphing into a menacing chant, echoing off the walls. "Help us," the children intoned, their voices rising in a dissonant harmony that filled my soul with an inconsolable sorrow. In that instant, I understood. They were not just seeking liberation, they wanted validation of their suffering. Sprinting towards the flickering light, I felt the cold tendrils reach out for me again, but this time I was resolute. I had to break free. "I will remember you," I screamed, words tumbling out, "a promise. You weren't forgotten." Their cries morphed into something softer for just a moment, like a sigh of relief woven with pain. That I reached the light and flung back the fabric of darkness with trembling hands. As I bolted through, the freezing grasp around me dissolved into warmth. I stumbled, sprawling into the corridor from before, breathless and shivering. The whispers abruptly silenced, replaced by an eerie stillness. Staring back into the dark, dread flooded my veins. The door whispered closed behind me, sealing whatever lay inside. I could still feel the weight of the children's stares, familiar yet so far away. Part of me longed to return to be the hero Lila needed, but I couldn't. Outside, the moon shone bright, and the night sky stretched infinitely above me. As I stood, trying to calm my racing heart, uncertainty washed over me. Had I really found a way out? Were the children still trapped inside? Those questions loomed unanswered, a heavy fog in my mind. But I knew one thing: I could never return here. I moved quietly away from the church, taking a long look back, the shadows within offering a hint of lingering presence. I walked home through the stillness of night, aware that I would carry their voices with me, echoes of laughter intertwined with the heavy weight of sorrow, forever entwined with my thoughts. I wonder if I truly saved them or if I only escaped. I guess I'll never know.